Welcome to the UFO Files Show with your host, Jerry Pippin.
Hello, I'm Jerry Pippin. We're at the Cover Up Cafe, and we're in Roswell, New Mexico, 60 years ago, on either July 3rd or July 4th, according to who you talk to. There was a crash here with extraterrestrials, but this is not the only place things like that have happened. And we have a couple of people here right now who are going to talk about an incident in Mexico.
Yes, Noe Torres.
Okay,
yeah,
Noe,
but it's a
Noe. And then of course Ruben Uriarte. Ruben, welcome to the show too.
Thank you, Jerry. Thanks for the invitation.
And tell us the name of the book and what it's about.
This is a very interesting case. We call the book Mexico's Roswell, the Chihuahua UFO Crash.
And you might tell people where Chihuahua is. We've all heard about it. There's a song about it, an instrumental years ago. And
well, yeah.
I just started as a disc jockey, and I called it Chihuahua, and they laughed me right out of the station. So,
Chihuahua.
yeah.
People have asked us if this is a book about dogs. No, it's not about dogs. Chihuahua is one of the states of Mexico that borders the United States, borders the Texas area, and people are well familiar with the Chihuahuan Desert. So the Chihuahuan Desert encompasses the Mexican state of Chihuahua, which is is adjacent to El Paso and the western part of Texas along the Big Bend National Park area of West Texas. So just across the river from there is the Mexican state of Chihuahua.
Now, this book has lots of pictures in it, by the way. So there are evidently a lot of evidence about this thing happening, right?
Yes, we've included over 100 pictures, illustrations, graphs, charts, etc., because we think that this is one of the most important UFO crash retrieval cases since the 1947 case here in Roswell.
What year did this happen?
This happened in 1974, August 25th. And one thing that we wanted to share is that information is based out of a report, a leak, which we feel may have been a leaked military document known as the Deneb Report. And in there it describes the event where a UFO was being tracked by U.S. radar, and it was going toward the coast of Corpus Christi, going at a speed of about 2,250 miles. It diverted south, made a right angle, went south toward Mexico, then it went directly toward the northern area of northern boundaries of border of Mexico, and it collided with an airplane.
What kind of airplane?
Well, in the report, it describes it as a small plane, so we don't have the exact type. But this leads into another scenario where the Mexican military went to retrieve the airplane, and they found the disc object, and all this was being under the surveillance of U.S. military.
So in other words, they just thought it was a plane crash, and even though it might be routine, they were surprised to see the disc, or did radar show it was two things that hit, and they thought they might see people? What do you think was going on there? In other words, were they looking for a flying saucer or another airplane besides the one that crashed with the saucer?
Well, based on... Go ahead.
The Deneb report indicates that the strange object had been picked up by U.S. military radar at two different locations along the Texas-Mexico border. However, it appears that the Mexicans were only aware of a plane crash having taken place near Coyame, Chihuahua, which is across the border from Presidio, Texas. So the Mexican authorities came out to do what they thought was just an airplane crash. Meanwhile, along the Rio Grande River, along the Texas border, the U.S. military was aware that they had seen on radar two different objects heading toward each other, and then suddenly both objects disappeared off the radar screen.
It sounds to me like you're saying the U.S. military might have thought there was more to it than what the Mexicans did at the time.
I think so, because of the fact that it had been picked up by radar off the coast of Corpus Christi, tracked close to Brownsville, Texas, and then all the way into Mexico.
How is the secret information handled in Mexico? Is it as rough as it is in the United States to get real stories?
That's a real good question. As you know, as it relates to Roswell, 1947, there was at first an immediate announcement by the Army, the Roswell Army Air Force, and then they covered it up, and then you didn't hear much about it until later. There was more information released by this document through the archives, the Eisenhower document that talked about the Roswell crash. Also, it talked about another crash that occurred on the Mexican side of the border. What we're finding out through our research is that there's been a collaboration of between both governments, both the military, and the book goes into depth about. We talked about the missile crisis, where German scientists were brought over to White Sands, New Mexico, to test V2s, right? To get they brought Werner von Braun, and then of course they start testing V2s. Well, some of these V2s steered off course and crashed into the Mexican side of the desert. We had two incidents in 1947. We had another incident that happened in 1967, and another crash that occurred in what's called the Zone of Silence in 1970. So every time there was a missile crash, you had U.S. involvement. Well, there was also a retrieval program called Moondust and Blue Fly that involved these retrieval teams to go and recover extraterrestrial craft. So this is where we're trying to tie in all this information together.
You say this incident that you write about happened in 1974?
Yes, the actual date is August 25th, 1974. That is the date given in the Deneb document.
See, immediately the first thing I thought about was 47, summer 74. Of course, it's just a coincidence, so there's no connection.
That's an interesting coincidence. Another interesting coincidence is geographically. We're talking about the Chihuahuan Desert, which extends all the way into New Mexico, and also the fact that the crash near Chihuahua, Mexico, happened very close to the Pecos River, which also extends all the way through Roswell, as a matter of fact. So. But another interesting angle of this is
probably no connection.
Yeah, it's just probably coincidental,
Yeah.
anecdotal. But the interesting thing is that there seem to be a high number of UFO sightings and paranormal events in the Chihuahuan Desert area, both in northern Mexico and in the southwestern United States. And so that's an interesting angle of it.
Now, when you both of you found out about this, it was years later, right? Wasn't 1974 when you knew about it, or was it?
No, we got involved in it through just more than about a year and a half ago. Noe had contacted me because the History Channel was doing a number of crash retrieval programs, and they were doing on Mexico Roswell, China's Roswell. Texas Roswell. They were doing all these crash retrieval stories. So I was involved in the documentary, and then Noe, who was doing a book at the time, had contacted me and wanted to get more information.
Were you a researcher, cameraman? What were you doing? A director?
And I was interviewed as one of the UFO experts, or whatever they call it, but as a
and Noe, when you saw him on that documentary, you must have said, I have to talk to this guy, huh?
Yes, I was doing a book at that time on Texas UFO sightings, historic Texas UFO sightings, and this was one of the cases I had run across on the internet, but there was very little information about it out there. So I contacted the people who were interviewed for that show, and the response that I got that I felt was really good was Ruben's response. And so we started talking to each other and decided that this was a good enough story to put into book form, at least to get the ball rolling on further investigations and to get perhaps more light shed on this very interesting case that has been more or less ignored.
Do you fellows live close to each other?
No, actually, I live along the Texas-Mexico border in South Texas, and Ruben lives near Oakland, California.
Up in the Bay Area.
Yeah, that's not exactly next door.
No, not quite, but, with technology, the internet, and getting on Yahoo Messenger and all that, it's like he's right next door.
Over 35% of our audience is somewhere else, Australia, wherever.
Exactly. But something I wanted to share was that I'm the director with MUFON for Northern California, and also I'm the liaison with OMIFO, which is the Mexican UFO organization nationally. So we're developing this relationship and developing a number of contacts with the Mexican investigators throughout the country. So this has been a very big interest to them because, number one, it happened in Mexico. Number two is that this collaboration effort between both countries with researchers, we're starting to uncover more information that may lead, again, to the big cover-up.
Now, what about the Mexican government? Are they subservient to the U.S. on all the secrecy, or?
This is a question that comes up frequently from Mexican UFO researchers. They want to know exactly what the politics might be
Uncle
like.
Sam's calling the shots or not.
Right, and they're very defensive also about the interests and rights of their country.
Sure.
We went back, and historically, as Ruben was saying earlier, we went back in time and looked at previous incidents where the U.S. military was allowed to cross the border to retrieve downed missiles and things like that. And we also know that there were political connections dating back to the 40s and early 50s between the two countries with regard to retrieval incidents like this. Ruben, do you want to add more to that?
Yeah. What we found was back in the 50s, in the early 50s, Miguel Alemán was the president of Mexico, and he had close communication with Truman, who was the president at that time. Later, Eisenhower became president after Truman had finished his term. But what we found was that there's been communication through other networks that Miguel Alemán was told by Eisenhower that he was taken to a location somewhere in the Southwest where he actually seen the crash retrievals and bodies of extraterrestrials.
So we always hear this story about Eisenhower landing at Edwards and the treaty in '54. This is something else. Eisenhower may have been involved in a lot of things.
Well, we're finding that we're getting information from the actual people that were involved in crash retrievals, and also that were involved in military operations, or had seen objects and were told to be quiet, or they would suffer severe consequences. And this is what we're going into.
Does the Mexican government do the same thing? Do they tell people and threaten them? I mean, it's pretty obvious U.S. government has.
We haven't gotten that sense.
You haven't ran across that yet.
Ruben works with a lot of UFO investigators in Mexico, and that's not the case as much as it is here in the U.S.
Yeah. What's interesting, though, is that some of these historical cases, are the good old men in black come up again. Uh-huh. And you find that the men in black have threatened certain individuals to keep quiet. In our book, we did a research of a pilot, Carlos de los Santos. 8 months later, he was flying a small airplane going back toward Mexico City. And then all of a sudden he felt like he was being watched. He looked to his left, there was a small disc right above his wing. He looked over to his right, there was another small disc. Then all of a sudden he's looking in front of his canopy, and this object came and slammed right underneath his fuselage. It had control of his airplane for 18 minutes. He's calling Mayday, 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 and air traffic controllers in Mexico City were seeing these objects in his airplane. I've got the actual recordings of him calling Mayday, Mayday, Mayday.
Nobody answered?
And they were trying to calm him down.
Oh, okay.
And they raised his airplane from 10,000 feet up to 14,000 feet. His plane was not pressurized. And then all of a sudden, they let him go. The plane, he was able to retrieve back, but he had the crash underneath the fuselage. So
when he did have some physical evidence that something happened up there.
Well, then later, he was met by J. Allen Hynek and some other notable researchers, And then there was these individuals that were dressed in black. They told them, you need to be quiet or else. They threatened them. And that was one instance, and there's been a number of others. So it's almost the same kind of a scenario that we've been getting.
It's very interesting that movies and fiction writers seem to have a lot of this that comes out in real life. Have you noticed that?
That's absolutely correct. We're right now working on a case. There's a retired U.S. Air Force colonel who lives in North Texas who is telling a remarkable story about visiting the site of a UFO crash retrieval. He's 81 years old, and he's finally decided to come forward with his story. But even though he's 81 and his military career is long over, he was so he received so many threatening phone calls and messages from his former superiors and other people in the military that even now, so many years, he left the military in the middle 60s. He still feels very uncomfortable talking, and it's only now after so many years that he has decided to come forward with the full details of his story.
Why do you think the government is so ambitious in guarding these secrets about this?
We may have to go back to what Stanton Friedman used to share at the conference. The country that controls the technology controls the world. And it could who knows that that's part of the reason why they're doing the retrievals, right. For the technology reasons, but also some of the issues that have come up. We talked about the Mexican convoy that went out to recover that craft. When they went out to discover the wreckage of the airplane, they also discovered the disc. Well, what happened was that all these soldiers died.
I want to follow that up. We've got to take a break, and we'll come back. We'll also go to the audience if they have some questions, because I wanted to ask you about the ramifications of the crash retrieval itself, and whether or not there was any evidence of inhabitants on any of on that craft. Our guest, of course, Noe Torres and Ruben Uriarte, and it's interesting that I almost said Chihuahua. The Chihuahua UFO crash is just now coming to light, and there seems to be a lot of things about this thing that we need to find out about. I'm Jerry Pippin. You're listening to the UFO Files. We're broadcasting from Roswell, New Mexico. The biggest secret ever is about to be revealed. Fast walkers, UFO and alien disclosure.
Words you were never meant to hear.
It's clear we're dealing with a cosmic Watergate.
This is the biggest secret in the history of the human race, the known modern history of government.
Photos you were never meant to see. Video you never knew existed. People you were never meant to meet.
As Jack Nicholson would say, you can't handle the truth.
Essentially everything that you would want to know has been covered up.
Things you were never meant to know about.
No one has produced a higher quality, better produced DVD. Anytime, anywhere. Fast Walkers now available on DVD for only $19.95 at shopjerrypippin.com. Hello, everyone. This is Jerry Pippin. We're broadcasting from the UFO Files second headquarters, I guess, right down the street from the UFO Museum in Roswell, New Mexico. We've been involved with these folks for some time. It's always a pleasure to come back to Roswell. And our guest, really in a phenomenal book. They cover this one crash, but there's other things in the book. I saw something from 1908 or something that you wrote about. So you did a lot of research, for sure. Noe Torres and Ruben Uriarte, and this book is available, correct? You can probably get it at Amazon. We have a link to get it too.
Yes, I am by profession. I am a librarian and have always been interested in doing research. I've written several books that have to do with history and involved looking up a lot of information in historical archives, libraries, and things like that. So Ruben and I spent a lot of time doing the grunt work to put together the evidence for this story, and not only that, but we went out to the Chihuahuan Desert, to Coyame, where this happened. We talked to villagers there, and we were determined before we published our book to have as much information of the little information that's out there about this crash retrieval. We wanted to get as much of it as we could, documented and evidence.
One of the people here in the restaurant asked if you'd gone out to this site personally, and you have.
Yes, we spent a week in January of this year in Coyame. Before we went there, we had done about a year's worth of contacting folks by phone and email who live in the area. And one of our biggest assets for information in that area is a local attorney. He's an attorney in Chihuahua, the capital of the state, Chihuahua City, but he's a big landowner in Coyame, and he owns two big ranches that are just adjacent to where this object is believed to have crashed. So he gave us a lot of information about the strange things that he's seen on his property. There have been landing marks, and Ruben can talk about some of the other things. But he and other people that we contacted ahead of time paved the way for us going down there and putting all this evidence together.
When you said strange things, I was wondering, and one of our members of the audience wanted to know, any paranormal activity down there that you detected?
We also had the opportunity to go to what's called the Zone of Silence. I went in October.
Tell me about that.
Well, it's an area that's supposedly an area located south of Chihuahua and Coahuila, where radio signals cannot reach. There's a high magnetism area. It's been an area where there's been a report of a lot of UFOs. When we went there, we interviewed some people that live out there in these small ranches. They very much keep information to themselves. You have to really gain their trust, and that. And one of the questions, and also they don't want to appear. They're very humble, very open, honest people, but they're not looking for sensationalism or attention. And
let's talk about the crash itself for a minute. Any evidence of any, for lack of a better term, extraterrestrial EBEs or whatever you want to call them?
The Deneb report, upon which most of our book is based, along with the field investigation that we did and the library research, the Deneb report itself does not mention that there were any bodies recovered other than any extraterrestrial bodies, EBEs, but we ran across an interesting story from a longtime UFO researcher, Robert Dean, who worked with us. I
know Bob.
Right. Bob worked with us on part of this book, and he told us this incredible tale, which we've included in one of the chapters, where he was in Mexico City about 5 years after the Coyame crash incident, and he was approached by a Mexican policeman who told him that he indicated he wanted to talk to him, and the policeman pulled out of his wallet a picture of what looks like a gray alien, and he said that this alien, the body of this alien, had been recovered along the Texas-Mexican border in the crash of a UFO. And Bob has the feeling that this may have been associated with the Coyame crash, although we don't know for sure, and there's been a number of reported UFO crash retrievals along the Texas-Mexico border. But because of the time frame in which it happened, which Bob was given the picture in Mexico City and about 5 years after Coyame incident, there could be a link.
When we talk about these incidents in another country like Mexico, which is next door to the United States, and a lot of things involving UFOs happen in the southwestern United States, what do you make of that? Is this? I know, for instance, we do sightings on the radio every week or two, and there's no shortage of people seeing things everywhere. But there always seems to be like there was a lot of activity in this part of the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we were really curious about why there's so many reports of sightings, and one of the things that we found, of course, is the trajectory of that particular object back in 1974 flew over a very remote area. And what we're finding as of today is that whole stretch is very remote, not populated or sparsely populated. And here's the thing, that here you have a sparsely populated border next to the biggest military nation in the world, and how ideal would it be for these objects to fly in and out of an area where they're not going to be threatened, because Mexico does not have the military, doesn't have the Air Force to shoot these things down.
Well, there have been, a lot of things officially from Mexico, like I'm thinking of the infrared thing with the Mexican Air Force and things like that. They seem to be a little more open to reporting at least part of it.
That happened March of 2004, and I had the privilege of going with two other scientists, Dr. Richard Haynes from NARCAP, and Ted Rowe, who was the executive officer for NARCAP, and myself. I went with them, and this was before the Mexican military had allowed Mr. Jaime Maussan to release this footage. When we went down there, this is where we interviewed Mr. Carlos de los Santos. We met air traffic controllers, other pilots that had been talking about and having experiences with objects flying over the Mexican City airport and other airports. And, of course, the focus was on air safety, because these objects are flying close to airliners, commercial airliners, not just in Mexico but all over the world.
Sure.
But the fact that the military was so interested, because here you had highly trained, qualified, that were trained by U.S. to fly this airplane to record, and yet they came across these strange objects. And Mr. Maussan, who does a lot of investigations, and he's a highly notable journalist, they gave him that information to share to the world.
Yeah, when we talk about UFO crashes, we almost in the same sentence we're talking about superior technology, but they still have accidents. I wonder what causes that. You have any ideas about why we have so many crashes?
Well,
and they're not many, but you go to the crash retrieval conference in Las Vegas, and there's quite a few they bring up.
Of course, a lot of what we do is speculate on the possible causes of these crashes. However, one thing that's made an impact in my mind when I've read about crash retrievals is that we're dealing with beings who are mortal, who are, although they may have superior technology, we don't know exactly what that technology is. However, they are mortal, and they are capable of error, and it's possible that for whatever unforeseen circumstances these crashes occur, because of the evidence indicates that they do. So therefore, it's something that apparently has happened for various reasons.
You think there's any chance there might be intervention by the U.S., even though it seems like we're behind in technology, but maybe not as far as we think?
You know what's interesting, Jerry? I came across a document that was from the FBI when Hoover was involved in the FBI was very much interested in UFO and crash retrievals as well. And in that document, it stated that they had notified a military resource within the Air Force that said that they believed that at that time in the early 50s, they had these very high, powerful radars that was...
that's been the theory here in Roswell.
Well, that's where it came, this is what I saw within the document. Now, that happened in the 50s because we had a whole string of other crashes, and of course, as you know, the lightning strike theory
that radar in 47 was not the same radar you see on Channel 5.
Right.
For weather. I still wonder, with all the crash retrievals, that means somebody somewhere in some warehouse has some material. Looks like somebody would talk sometime.
That's an interesting point. One of the things that's been one of the theories that's been advanced that I happen to agree with is that if superior technology is found and we're not capable of doing anything with it right away because we have nothing that is analogous to it, and therefore, we can try to reverse engineer it, and we might be able to find some corollary uses for some of that technology, but the core of it is going to remain inaccessible to us until our own technology gets up to a higher level. So therefore, packing this away and storing it for continuous study long term would be the solution that's indicated here, because it would only be after many years of careful study and research and allowing our own technology to get closer to this one that has been retrieved. Only then would we be able to actually use some of it.
Just to go along with that, I heard this analogy. It's just like having a large nuclear submarine taken back to the 17th century. You think people would learn how to reverse engineer a nuclear submarine. So we may be that 17th century dealing with something
trying
so
to figure this out.
Yeah.
And I imagine they'd be scratching their head quite a lot. Where's the sale? What do you got planned next, guys?
We have the very interesting crash retrieval that also occurred along the Texas-Mexico border. It may, in fact, be mentioned in the Eisenhower briefing document. There is a mention of a crash retrieval along the Del Rio, Texas area, Texas-Mexico border in 1950. We have a gentleman who is retired U.S. Air Force colonel I mentioned earlier who is stepping forward with an incredible story about having actually visited the site where he saw a metallic disc-shaped object impacted into the side of a sand dune right along the Rio Grande River near Del Rio, Texas. So we've been interviewing him extensively. We went to visit him at his home in North Texas, and he's ready after all these years, after being out of the military since the middle 60s, he's ready now to give full details about his story, which is a fascinating one.
How big a craft was this particular one in Chihuahua? Do we know? The craft itself, the crash?
It was a small disc.
Small disc, which is in
16.5.
16 feet.
It was 16 feet 5 inches in diameter, and it was almost identical to the 3 UFOs that Ruben was mentioning approached and circled the plane over that was flying to Mexico City with the pilot. That 8 months later.
It's an incredible read, and we recommend it to everyone. Mexico's Roswell, and they came to the United States as Roswell to promote the book and do a little investigating, I imagine. It's the first time for you guys here?
Oh, here in Roswell?
Yeah.
Oh, this is my second time.
Okay.
Yes.
How about you?
This is my first time, although I've intended to come on many occasions. I'm very happy to be here.
Now, you still work at the library?
Yes, sir. I'm a librarian.
And do they know your interest in UFOs?
Actually, I've built up the UFO section of our library quite extensively, and so
the UFO publishers love you.
Yes. So the students.
Now, where is this library?
This is in South Texas, in McAllen,
Texas.
Yes,
Okay. We appreciate you guys coming by. Noe Torres and Ruben Uriarte, and you're probably going to be making the rounds with some other places since you're into this hot and heavy now, right, guys?
Oh, yes.
Correct.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank
Let's give them a hand.
Thank you, Jerry.
Okay, and the book is available, and we have a link to it. I'm Jerry Pippin. You're listening to the UFO Files. We're broadcasting from Roswell, New Mexico.